Matty Cunningham, I'm going to go to you first. We're going to flash the front pages, tomorrow's front pages, up as we go and we discuss this particular tragedy. I guess the question is, and we raised this last night when the story was very fresh, and that is, what were tourists doing on an active volcano that clearly had a history? And I guess there will be many inquiries and there'll be probably repercussions, you would imagine. But I guess, you know, as the families grieve tonight, as the families worry and wonder about the fate of their loved ones, it's an obvious question, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is, and as Jacinta Ardern, as we heard there in Jackson Williams' package, we heard her say there will be bigger questions, and those questions must be asked. And, you know, the primary question will be the one you've just been asking there, Gleeso. I mean, why on earth were tourists on this active volcano, given there'd been that activity there just in the weeks leading up to this horrific event? No doubt this will all be examined by New Zealand authorities. It'll be examined by the coroner. It's going to be examined by the New Zealand government. That's going to be cold comfort for the families of those people who have tragically lost their lives in this incident. And as we heard in Jackson's package there, I mean, the death toll, the official death toll stands at 6 at the moment, but it's going to rise. That's almost certain. I think it's going to push up, you know, to at least 13, if not more, given so many people are unaccounted for. There's going to be plenty of questions asked here in Australia as well, given so many of the people who've been either killed or injured over there are Australian. And, you know, tragically tonight there are families out there who have loved ones who are missing, and, you know, they're just sitting there probably hoping for the best, expecting the worst. It's just an absolutely awful situation. And perhaps, as you're saying, with these questions that need to be asked, one that probably should never have happened.
Lisa, if we go to the front of the Australian, which obviously gets to the nub of the issue, tourists not warned of risk is the splash head. 11 Aussies feared dead. New Zealand PM demands answers over tragedy. Too dangerous to recover the bodies. And today we've heard from experts, volcanic experts, who have basically said that this was sheer madness because volcanoes, by their very nature, are so unpredictable. And in the last 2 weeks, we'd seen an escalation in activity at that particular site, and we'd actually seen warnings upgraded, and yet they were allowed onto that particular volcano.
Yeah, Glee, so the warnings had been upgraded. It was a risk category of 2. So right now, as you say, as we go to air tonight, they're still saying there's a 50-50 chance of another eruption as we talk. But I think what struck me the most was, yeah, as this all unfolded, it was the heroic efforts of the helicopter pilots who, you know, put their own lives at risk to get in there where they probably should not have gone, to try to rescue as many people as they could, and just to see exactly what was happening on that island. You know, the situation that they faced, not to mention, you know, the people who were on the boats rescuing people off that island, just absolutely horrendous. And you now look at the number of people who are in hospital. And of course here, even in Queensland, we now have our hospitals, our main hospitals, on alert to potentially see patients brought in from New Zealand, because as we heard in that report, those hospitals in New Zealand are now at capacity. And you're talking about, I think they're saying people with burns of at least 30% of their body, a lot of them with problems because they've inhaled ash. You know, it's an awful situation, and you can't imagine the horrific burns that these people are suffering. And no doubt, you know, doctors here and nurses here as well now on standby tonight.
Matt, no part of Australia has been untouched by this tragedy. If we go to the front of the Courier Mail, and we can see there, pray for them all is the splash head, heartbreaks for victims of New Zealand volcano tragedy. And there you can see the photos, and we've got Julie Richards, 47, and her daughter Jessica Richards from Brisbane, missing. We've got Anthony Langford, 51, from North Sydney, missing. We've got Christine Langford from North Sydney, missing. We've got Winona Langford, 17, from North Sydney, missing. Jessie Langford, 19, from North Sydney, missing. We've got Gavin Dallow, 53, from Adelaide, missing. We've got Zoe Hosking, 15, from Adelaide, missing. We've got Richard Elzer, 32, from Coffs Harbour, missing. We've got Carla Matthews, 32, from Coffs Harbour, missing. We've got Hayden Marshall Inman from Wakatani, New Zealand, who's been confirmed as dead. We've got Crystal Browett, 21 from Melbourne, who's missing. We've also got Marta Hollander, 48 from Sydney, missing. Also missing Barbara Matthew and Berend Hollander from Sydney. Maureen Jones, 68 from Bathurst. Jane Murray, 56 from Sydney. And Susan Cole, who's been identified as an Australian national. Matt, it is a horrendous and tragic roll call, isn't it?
And it really hits home, Gleeso, when you read out those names one by one, and we see, you know, their names and their photographs, you know, and as you would know, you know, when you're working on a newspaper covering a story like this, you know, it's just heartbreaking. You know, it brings back to me some memories of covering stories like, you know, MH17 and MH380,
Yep.
and, you know, suddenly you're there and you're putting these names and faces on the front page of a newspaper, and they're the names and faces of people whose loved ones will probably never see them again. It's just heartbreaking stuff, absolutely tragic. I know that on the front page of the Australian there was also the story of the family from Adelaide. Of course, the mother has been found in the hospital with critical injuries, serious burns. Her 15-year-old daughter and her husband are both missing, and you'd have to say missing, presumed dead. I mean, it's just absolutely horrible stuff, and horrible stuff for the families of those who are waiting for answers about exactly what's happened.
Yeah, and I mean, for example, even if we go Lisa Goddard to the front of the Cairns Post, it hits home with, you know, oh no, that's him. Families agonising wait to learn couple's fate in New Zealand. The brother of a northern Queensland couple believed missing amidst the devastating volcano tragedy in New Zealand has told of his family's agony, wondering if they were alive or dead. Herberton-born Robert Buck Rogers, 78, was among the 27 Australians listed as missing by the New Zealand Red Cross in the wake of the volcanic eruption on White Island. Again, this is a story, and Matt makes a really, really good point there. Newspapers over the last sort of 24 to 36 hours have scrambled to pull together these stories, and it does remind me in very much... I was editor of the Sunday Mail during MH17 and MH370, and these are incredibly challenging and difficult stories to cover.
Yeah, Gleeso, it takes me back to covering the Bali bombings. We saw the same thing, and we see that death toll continue to rise, and I think that's what everybody needs to brace themselves for. And look, you pointed out the Courier Mail's front page, and that is what hits home. As soon as you can see a face and a name, it just makes what is an awful disaster, an awful tragedy, so much more human. They are someone's sister, someone's brother, mother, father. That's what's the most heartbreaking part about it.
Indeed.